Time to talk about another legendary death metal band. We are ranking the albums of Obituary. Alright, and we are going to start at the beginning as we always do with Slowly We Rot in 1989. Strong start with a real classic here. The demented vocals make it really sound like John Tardy is just going rabid. Solid atmosphere takes simple riffs a long way, and even the slower ones like Until Death are seriously head bob inducing. Also one of the better sounding debut old school death metal albums in terms of production. It does get a little slow in places for me, and I definitely prefer the faster, thrashier stuff like Intoxicated, but overall, this is really great. Putting it at S tier. Then we have Cause of Death in 1990, another classic. This one features James Murphy of Death on guitar. Just another one of those big albums opening up with that long, spooky intro before breaking loose again. But I don't know if it's a hot take that personally I prefer the debut overall. This one just seems a little bit less focused to me, with songs that feel like they're stretching on a bit longer than they really need to. But of course, then there are also some really awesome tracks like Chopped in Half and Dying. I feel like I see a lot of people pick this as their personal favorite, and I'll give it its due. It's just not tip-top for me. So I'm putting this one at A tier. Of course, as always, put your own thoughts down in the comments as we go along here, but we're going to continue to The End Complete in 1992. You will still come with me. Alan West coming back on guitar here from the debut, and this album actually made number 16 on Billboard Heatseekers. Certainly not a bad album, but already at this point it kind of feels like a rehash without the same level of impact. A few of these tracks are a little more on the bland side too, like in The End of Life. There are some stronger parts, but it's not enough to keep me fully engaged. I do think that the drums sound fantastic at least. Maybe gonna piss some people off with this one, but I'm calling this one C tier. They followed that up with World Demise in 1994. If you listen to the albums in order at this point too, it really does start to feel like kind of a slow decline. Like, there's never a sudden drop in quality. It just has this sort of creeping sense of over-familiarity that I talked about in my, like, best death metal albums by, like, first albums, second albums, third albums, so on. All around this one, the word passable starts to come to mind. It's not terrible, not even necessarily unenjoyable to listen to, but just offering very little substance, in my opinion. I will say that they do a good job of capturing the dreary tone of that album cover with the sludginess of the guitar mirroring the choking air pollution, but ultimately it's another one that's kind of overlong and honestly a little bit boring, so I'm also putting this one at C tier. Then came Back from the Dead in 1997. This was the last album before the initial 6-year breakup and the first not produced by Scott Burns, and you can definitely hear the difference. But really, regardless of sound, the compositions are just extremely tired at this point. I guess Download kind of got me moving, but some of these songs actually made me wish I was listening to either Helmet or Power Trip instead. Easily one of the worst, in my opinion, D tier. Then there's Frozen in Time in 2005, making a comeback here. And with an opening track called Redneck Stomp, how could you not get interested in this one? So yeah, fortunately the hooks on this album are just so much stronger than the last few albums. Maybe that time away really did them some good. I feel like Alan is giving me something to actually chew on for his final outing with the band. Scott Burns also retired after producing this release. Going out with a bang there. It's nice to see them also really embracing shorter run times for the thrashy, often Slayer-esque sounding ragers like On the Floor, as well as more groovy ones like Blindsided. Still not exactly a tour de force, but a really fun album nonetheless. I'm putting this one at B tier. Unfortunately, they followed that up with Xecutioner's Return in 2007. Ralph Santoya stepping in on guitar here, and I was really hoping that after that last album and the lineup changes, it would shake things up for them. But really, this one just, again, falls flat and just very repetitive right from the start. I don't expect a ton from OSDM above something I can just really bang my head to, but this doesn't even really meet that criteria for me when compared to other classics in the genre. There's just so many other alternatives from other great discographies that I would rather dig into than re-listen to this one. So this one's also going to D tier. Then we had Darkest Day in 2009. Definitely another slight improvement here. The production and energy seem front and center once more. It's got some actually memorable moments too, like the pounding drum intro of Blood to Give or the ripping layered guitars of This Life. It is, however, once more just too long for its own good, which leads to some filler and repetition. And I know I make this complaint a lot. I have a video coming really soon actually talking about like what are the over hour long albums that I really do enjoy, just to prove that it's not that I don't like long albums, it's just that a lot of bands just don't have enough to say to fill up more of that time. And I think especially when it comes to old school death metal that's just really painting by numbers, there's just no need for it. Get in, get out, leave them wanting more. So yeah, overall, this one's just another C tier for me. Next up is Inked in Blood in 2014. So another one of those album covers I remember seeing everywhere when this came out. And this one was actually crowdfunded on Kickstarter and ended up on Billboard 200 at 75. So great work for them on that.
I am the god from the previous life as I'm living outside of this hell.
Gotta love that do-it-yourself attitude. Definitely hearing another shift in production as well with the vocal style and more overtly kind of hardcore and crossover kind of sound. I know some purists may have something to say about that, but as a fan of those genres, I connected a lot more with this one, with tracks like Centuries of Lies, the banging visions in my head, or the echoing drums of Back on Top. Feels like material that would have fit on tour with like DRI or even Hatebreed. I really dig this album, think it's a great time, putting it at B tier. And then they followed that up with Obituary in 2017. So here we are once again with the dreaded late career self-titled album. And you know the drill, these are high promise records that either redefine or completely fail to deliver on the hype, and fortunately here, I do think it's the former. I actually think this album rivals even the debut in its youthful rebellion. It takes everything that the last album did and just does it better. It was also well reviewed for those same reasons. Plenty of bangers here with more thrash mentality on Brave, which I'd say is one of their best album openers. Set and Stay, which has arguably their best solo to date. Betrayed. If you ask me, this belongs in Obituary's top 3 or 4, which is impressive for an album coming nearly 30 years later, so I'm putting this one at A tier. And that brings us to Dying of Everything in 2022. I do love that title, by the way. Barely Alive is another banger of an opener, and honestly, I feel like John Tardy's voice only gets better with age. This track is just brimming with attitude and the energy of a band still in their 20s. Great riffs, killer drums, death metal to the core. What more could you want? They follow that up with the more atmospheric but no less head bob inducing The Wrong Time and Without a Conscience. Lots of very simple but infectious guitar hooks here. They still understand the assignment, and the solos are also very tastefully done. War has a fun, almost psychedelic groove and stomp to it before going full tilt again with the thrashy title track. This may be one of my other favorites with the pace changes and also the creepy vocal effects around the middle. And speaking of which, despite being a pretty meat and potatoes death metal album, the dynamics still managed to keep it varied and engaging all the way through. 10 banger tracks without a dud among them, solid production too, keeping that old school grit while giving it space to breathe. Now again, bear in mind these tier lists are all self-contained, so while I would grade this something like a B+ within the larger scope of new music right now, within the realm of their discography, I'd go ahead and give this an S tier. Y'all check out this playlist for plenty more death metal related rankings and videos, and let me know down in the comments again, how would you rank these differently? Let's have a conversation down there. Subscribe if you enjoyed it, but that'll do it for now. Flight of Icarus signing off. I will see you in the trenches.